Let's keep calm and mother on. Mothering is way too important to do alone and way too serious to be serious all the time. My name is Christy Thomas, and I am here shoulder to shoulder with you, mothering and enjoying life together. This is the podcast where you can focus on being mindful and taking a deep breath with me and learning new things so you can pause and savor the amazing life you already have. I am so excited today to welcome Meg Apperson. She's a blogger, homeschooling mom, pastor's kid. They live in North Carolina, and she just released an amazing book, Sky Full of Stars. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So your book, when I read it, I had to completely ignore my family. I couldn't find a spot to put it down. I mean, I had to put it down and go make dinner.
Yeah.
And then I told my family all about it. And my husband was like, why are you reading that? It sounds so hard. And I'm like, but you have to hold someone else's pain sometimes. And your book is beauty and love and grace wrapped in like hard stuff. So how would you describe your book? Because no one besides me and you know what it is, since it's a podcast.
Yeah. So Sky Full of Stars is really a story of my journey of motherhood with our third child, who was born profoundly disabled, medically fragile. And, we were living a very kind of, ordinary life with our two traditionally abled children. And it came out of nowhere. It was not something I'd ever anticipated. We had no family history of this. And so Avery was born with some very severe birth defects. And so the book came about because I had a blog, and I'd been blogging with family to keep them updated on Avery's progress and condition, and people started sharing it, and it became this huge community that was following along and really loving her. And so the book is about really finding purpose and joy and being okay in the midst of really, really, really hard stuff. It's about, learning to advocate for Avery. I have a little bit of a gritty personal history that I share in the book that really played a role in knowing what could happen when I didn't stand up and advocate for people correctly. And so when Avery was born, it became this issue of life and death. What was I going to do? How was I able to lay down the old stories, lay down the old ways that I lived in order to be able to care for her the way she needed to be cared for?
And in a year where the whole country feels like they've lived through a military deployment and lots of hard things in 2020, I think this book is coming out in a divine time that we're all exhausted and at the end of our limit with some of these restrictions and just loss from potential COVID losses, that your book gives hope because there is still that sky full of stars. Your last little bit about a sky full of stars with endurance and perseverance and character and hope and purpose and love and trust. A story of goodness, of God's goodness. So I'm grateful that you had the time with 4 kids to take the time to write it because you're a really good writer.
Thank you. I'm glad I had the time too. I'm really excited to release it, especially right now. In, like you said, I think it's divine timing with everything that's going on. When you think of a sky full of stars, the sky is dark. It's black, and you can't always see where you're going. And that idea of a sky full of stars is that the stars are always out, but when it's bright out, you can't see that they're there. And when everything gets dark, then the skies become visible, and you can learn things about yourself and others that you wouldn't have seen in your easy, ordinary life. You get a sense of clarity on the things that you're passionate about, and really gifts that you have kind of bubble to the surface as you have to survive and thrive in something that's not ideal. So I kind of think it's a very unique story. A lot of people are not going to relate to the specifics of Avery's condition, and having a medically fragile child. But I think the idea of having to learn how to suffer well and kind of finding out who we are in the midst of it is a really universal idea that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to.
Do you think overall that as a country that we're seeing that suffering is just part of life with COVID-19, that we're able to embrace it a little bit more?
I hope so. Yeah.
So, how can we help someone when we know that they're suffering? Was there something that helped you the most from other people?
Yeah. So for me, it's really practical stuff. Like that's how I like to support other people. And that was really impactful when people would do just the really practical things, bring a meal, drop off, you know, a gift certificate for coffee, things that just said, I see you and I remember that that this is what you're going through. And people would do it, years out. There's that kind of initial
Yep.
crisis and everybody's very supportive then. And then there were people that would just, even as time went on, just reach out in a way that said, I know that you're still carrying this heavy
Mm-hmm.
thing long term, and just those little teeny bits of support that to me felt so huge.
So, do you still get that sort of support in your everyday life from people?
Oh yeah. I mean, especially, recently my daughter Avery had another surgery that was the biggest one she's ever had. I mean, the hardest recovery she's ever had, the most pain
Oh,
she's ever been in, which is
a
a
lot.
lot,
Yeah.
from what she's been through. It was really, we weren't sure that she was going to be able to survive the surgery, that kind of thing,
Wow.
like going into
Yeah.
it knowing, we're doing something that we have to do for her, but that is the risk of it was just astronomical. So, it had been years since her last surgery, and people are really great around surgery time.
Mm-hmm.
Bring meals for a couple weeks afterwards, and this one was just huge, and people were amazing. I mean, somebody reached out while she was in the hospital when we found out that she was going to be okay. It reached out and said, could you make an Avery's wish list? And so I made it, and people would sell it out over like days. And I'm thinking, where are you people coming from? Like, I know that people support us and love Avery, but it was just the most dramatic outpouring of love and support that we've ever had. And she's going to be 6 in March. Like we've been doing this a
Yeah.
long time.
But it's not going to
Yeah, people
end
are
soon,
amazing.
right? Like Avery's condition requires a
No.
lot of help from you into the future, into adulthood, probably. So, in your family, you have three typical able children, right? And then Avery, how did they get along with her? Is it hard to go places as a family? Because I know October is Bully Prevention Month. Are your other kids aware of all the differences?
They are aware. They treat her as a completely ordinary sibling. They are aware that things are different. And my daughter, who's only 15 months older than
Mm-hmm.
Avery, my second child, they were born really close together. She will say sometimes, like, man, I wish Avery didn't have a trach so she could go swimming with me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to her, it's totally normal. Like they don't really remember really another way of life. Now, my oldest son, we found out when Avery was little that he had a congenital heart condition, and so
Mm-hmm.
he had surgery also, which I think after Avery was born, she was maybe 6 months old when he had surgery on his heart, and they that's a really sweet bond they have where they share kind of that unusual suffering that's not normal to childhood, that
Mm-hmm.
really like creates a kind of maturity in children. So they have that bond, and he is an amazing older brother anyway, very protective of her. My older daughter is very protective of her sister, but you know, as far as bullying goes, we very rarely have an experience where my other children are aware that people are noticing Avery's differences. I come from a huge family. I'm number 5 of 8 kids, and there are 24, maybe 25 at this point, grandchildren. And so
Wow.
Avery is just, surrounded with cousins. Most of my family lives here, and so her interaction is that children treat her like she's one of them.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah,
yeah.
she
So
has this
so
amazing tribe and bubble of love
yes,
around her.
yes. And we would go on vacation when she was really little, and Avery didn't learn to walk mostly until she was about 4, and she was aware of that difference with the other cousins who could move faster. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember one Christmas, Avery was crawling because she did learn to crawl when she was around 18 months, and this is probably going to make me tear up, but we were watching the children play, and they all had reverted to crawling
Oh.
to be on Avery's level. So there's like this row of children like crawling out of the room with her, and it was just like that is what family is about, where the cousins even would would go to those links to make
Yeah,
her be included. So just really, really sweet stuff like that.
that's amazing. That, yeah, no, I'm going to tear up. Um, we've experienced some of this that my middle daughter has amblyopia, which is like lazy eye. And so during
Mm,
swim lessons, when you can't wear your bifocal glasses, her eye
right.
goes in. And so my older daughter, they're 16 months apart, um, has stepped in multiple times when she was little to say, like, no, like my sister's eyes are just her eyes, like leave her alone. So I'm coming from that perspective of that every once in a while it's surprising who will make a comment, or like when she had to do her eye patching, like
Mm.
who would notice and who would say something. Do you find that parents are scared to ask, or what would you prefer people if
Yeah,
their
that is a
kids
really
are
good
curious?
question. Yeah, and I don't know that I I don't know that I have a good answer for that personally. Like when I walk in places, I can see that people are kind of taken aback at Avery, and I think that their expectation is that that will make me tread lightly. There is this, and it's unspoken, but there's something about when people give you looks, when a
Mm-hmm.
child is different, that they want you to feel like you don't belong.
Right.
They want you to feel like I'm on eggshells to make you comfortable with my child. And that is just not how I'm going to live with her.
No.
So we walk in, and I don't look to see who's staring. That was something that I felt very briefly at the beginning. I think because I'd been psyching myself out about it, that
Yeah.
people were going to give her looks or
Yeah.
ask, and I just walk in, and we I don't, no one has ever asked me yet. Let's just say
Okay.
that. I don't know how I would respond,
Okay.
um because I don't know. I have maybe high standards for children. I have high standards for my children about how to
Yeah.
interact with other people.
No, I
So,
understand. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm just curious because I know that sometimes children are innocently curious. And so there's so many ways that people want to just learn how to love someone else, I think.
Yeah.
And sometimes because of our own baggage or curiosity or unknown that we offend people, especially parents with families with special needs, because if we're living a life that's without that burden, we don't know
Mm.
what we don't know a lot of.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just say that, there is a lot of innocent curiosity. And I would say at the same time that, people don't get to burden other people with their curiosity. Does that
Hmm.
make sense? So
Absolutely.
it's different for children, but at the same time, like, just because you are curious, and especially as adults, because there is this
Absolutely.
level of like, well, I deserve to know because you're here, which means I should get to ask. You go ask your doctor.
Yeah.
Like, my kid doesn't need to be, um, you know, bombarded with your questions because you're curious. Like, you
Yep.
can handle yourself and your curiosity. And it's the same thing when people would, and I've not experienced this, but I feel a little defensive of other people that I see walk through this. Is,
Yeah.
they'll be out in public after their loved one has, finished a surgery or around a
Hmm.
chemo or something, and people feel like they should be able to ask, and then get the person who's experienced this to feel the burden of helping them understand how their family member is doing. And you
Yes.
go, you it would probably be best if you asked someone else, or if you read their newsletters that they're putting out, or
Hmm.
their blog posts that they're putting out, or whatever it is. Like, don't burden the family member or the person who's going with something with your questions. Like, do the due diligence, and
Yeah.
then maybe instead of asking questions, say, just to let you know, I'm praying for you. I read your post, and we're really rooting for
Yep.
you. Or, if your child has questions, maybe starting not with the explain to me why your child is different. Start with, like, why don't you ask her name? Why don't you ask her
Right.
how old she is? What's her favorite color? You like her pink glasses.
Yeah. Like
Like,
you're wearing a
start
really
from a
cool
place
shirt.
of,
Yeah.
yes, a place of, like, we're both humans, not like I'm a human and you're different, so you should you should make it all right for me by explaining your differences to me, if that
Yep.
makes sense. And I'm probably very harsh about that. I just, I'm somebody who walks into a room and like struggles to find my place,
Hmm.
as a traditionally abled person. So for Avery, it's like, girl, you just walk in any room you need to walk in.
Yeah.
You don't need to make anybody else feel good about it or explain to them why you matter in this room. It, Anywhere you go belongs to you too.
Yeah. I think that's a really important message. Like this
Mm,
whole exchange right there. I hope that someone takes that really to heart, that when someone close to you is having a hard time, that you have due diligence on your own
mm,
to do that
yeah.
and to make the effort to read what they're writing. Like most of the time, right? There's all these caring bridge places and
Oh yeah.
Facebook. Like people want to share in a way that feels safe to them.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I know people who are writing extensive emails, to send out on a newsletter. And, that's an emotional burden just to take all the information, try to translate it into a way that in kind of layman's terms, and then
Yeah.
send it out. Like if they're doing all that work, take them up on it. Like that's the way that they've chosen to communicate with you. Don't decide, well, that's out there, but I'm not going to read it because I want to get it from the source. Don't do that. They've done this work. Don't
Yeah.
add to their plate just because, you want to. I don't know. I know that it really does come from a place of love.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody's asking, they're trying to communicate value and love. And
Hmm.
so I hope we can all recognize it as that, even when maybe it's, you know, misguided. It
Yeah.
really is coming from a place of trying to offer support. But I would just say, like, if people are doing the work to let you know the information, take them up on it. Don't look for your own special way of receiving that information.
That's really good. So through Avery's journey, through becoming Avery's mom, you grew so much. What is your number
Hmm.
one difference? Like what are you proud of? What's your biggest change that you're proud of in becoming
Yeah.
Avery's advocate and mom?
That's a good question. I would say being able to stand up and be her advocate. I think for most of my life, I was really, really terrified of any disapproval, of really rocking the boat or making a lot of noise. And, I would say that, after Avery was born, the way I had to change was that I had to advocate for her in really uncomfortable ways where it was like I would just rather be quiet and let the professionals do their work. And yet I uniquely, kind of divinely, had information that I think was from God to say,
Hmm.
no, you're going to have to open your mouth and speak and advocate for her. And so that was a huge change, just a change in personality to be able to say, I'm sorry that you can't find out what's wrong with her, but I can't leave until you do. Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to take her home, so you're going to have to try something else. And then seeing how that saved her life in several cases, it was like, okay, this is a real thing. And I kind of wielded it, probably not well at first. It's something that you kind of have to practice until you can advocate in a way that's not, like a punching match.
Yeah. But but initially, I think in American culture that it's so easy to look up to people in white coats as godlike figures.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so just in my normal everyday doctor experiences, advocating for myself has always felt like a challenge because of the prestige of doctors in the medical community. So speaking up and saying no to an attending at one point, or a resident, yeah, no, the attending about a medicine in the book,
yes,
that I was
yes,
like, wow. And the fact that someone came back to you and said, I am impressed that you stood up.
yeah, yeah. That was crazy, and I feel like that was at the very beginning of me figuring out how to advocate for her, and really, I think it was God that was just like, oh, you're gonna have to speak right now. So she's like, we're gonna use this, and I said, no, no, we're not gonna do that, and she came back like, oh, I don't think you understand, and it was one of those, if my life hadn't worked out the way it had, I wouldn't have understood. I would have said yes to that
Mm-hmm.
medication, but I did have this experience. And so I was able to say, oh, no, I know exactly what the medicine is, and this is what it's for, and this is how it works, and these are the warnings that come on the box. And she looked at me like, nobody does that. I was like, well, I am. So we're not doing it. And not just the resident,
Right.
I ended up speaking to the nutritionist and a feeding therapist, and they were all like, yeah, we don't use that in the United States like that. That was old protocol. We do not do that. I'm glad that you said that. And it was just that kind of thing, recognizing that I had put medical professionals as the gatekeepers, the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate gatekeepers, like I can't ever know, and I do really respect
Oh,
doctors
totally.
also, they're amazing.
Yeah,
And I
I
really
have
do
friends
know,
that are doctors. Like,
yes,
they're
so much
great
more than
people.
I ever could.
Yeah.
I could never go into Avery's brain and, like cut off her cerebellar tonsils. I mean, they really are amazing. They're
Yeah.
truly amazing. But I had this view of them as like the gatekeepers. Like I couldn't have a perspective that occurred to me that didn't occur to you and me be right. That just didn't happen. But it really actually does, because they're not gods, and it's actually unfair to put them in a position where we think that everything right's going to occur to them. They're going to do it all perfectly. It's the practice of medicine, which means everybody really is just practicing. And the more unusual a child, the less practice they've had
Mm-hmm.
in whatever, body part they're working with. So
Yeah. And the more
so
your
much.
child is more the teacher, then
Yeah, you're exactly right.
as you're living through these hard things, you are exhausting yourself in so many ways. And
Yeah.
now Avery's 6. So I'm guessing, and your baby's 2, because you have another baby that comes into
Yeah.
the story. Surprise, beautiful Ryan. So, how are you doing with self care in this moment? How do you take care of yourself? Like, you totally exhausted, you poured yourself out all the way.
It really took years for me to figure out that I had done that. In that initial period after crisis, there is so much adrenaline. You kind of feel like I'm a superhuman. I can do this forever, and everything's fine. And whenever there's crisis, thankfully your biology works to support that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it knows we're going to rise to this occasion and we're going to do what we need to do. And it was really when Avery stopped having surgeries all the time and we were home a lot. And so the adrenaline just starts to wear off a little bit, and spending more and more nights awake by her. We had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of home health nursing at the time, but we didn't have it on the weekends. And so somebody had to stay up and watch Avery. And really uniquely that job fell to me, not because my husband would not have been willing, but just because I took it all on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know. So I think by the time she was, I'm trying to remember what year it was, she was probably 2.5, 3. It occurred to me that I had really just pushed myself to the limit. I was in pain. My everything was out of whack. And so I went to the doctor like, I'm in my late 20s and I can't walk up a flight of stairs without gasping for breath, and I can't sleep on my back. All these things kind of really, really
Wow.
breaking down, like what's going on. And so they were like, wow, you're in terrible, terrible shape. Like you are severely anemic. You have no vitamin D in your blood. All these things to say you really have done a number. And it was just that I felt like I could go, 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 and it would never catch up with me. And it really, really did. And I guess the first thing I figured out was that sleep was such a huge deal. You know, I I just my sleep hygiene was very, very poor, and it was starting to get better. And then I found out that I was pregnant with Ryan.
Yeah.
So as an infant, he enjoyed sleep torture, is what I called it, for the first year of his life. But just realizing that sleep was such a big deal. When I got to the point where all the adrenaline had worn off and I was just so, so sick, I thought that it was like laziness. Like I can't get myself up and going, and I'm not working out as much. And so I just need to buckle down and force myself.
Yeah.
And I did that for a time, and it made it so much worse. So really figuring out that, stress will kill you. It is horrendous. And there are things that are actually stressors to your body that I felt like, oh, if I have 3 cups of coffee, that'll help me going, keep going. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, all that caffeine is actually going to, spike your cortisol and make you way more sick. And doing heavy lifting is going to make you way worse than if you did gentle yoga on the floor every day. So it was this change of mindset, like, no, I'm not lazy. I've actually just completely beaten my body down,
Yeah.
and being as gentle and kind with it as possible is the way to slowly, work back up. So that was a whole lifestyle shift to
It
make, and
it
one that
sounds
I
like
still
it.
kind of fight against now. Like, no, I should be running every day, but I had been running, and then when we found out Avery needed the surgery, this was back in August, running made me feel nauseous, and it was
Yeah.
like, no, this is your body telling you, not you're weak, push harder, but we're trying to protect you and let you know that this is too much for you. You need to stop. And so I had to stop and sleep more and go for walks instead of runs, and just figure out that when your biology is breaking down, it's not that it is against you, it is for you, and acting in a way that's giving you these red flags to say, hey, we need some help. You're doing too much. You need to scale back, or go talk to your doctor and figure out what it is that's hurting you. So
That's huge. I think that so often we go to that mental self-talk, right? Of that I'm just not enough and that I have to push harder and that it must be me,
oh yeah.
my like internal failure of control, or I'm just
Yep.
not a good enough person, or all
Yep.
the stories of shame that we layer onto ourselves that hide the fact that we are a fantastic child of God, that we just take all of this in, right? And layer it
Yeah,
on.
this idea, like that my body is failing me, and really that's very rarely the case where your, biology truly turns against you. That's very rare. Usually it's that it really is trying to help you. And I realized in a lot of ways, because I didn't ever want to verbalize my feelings,
Yeah.
that really my body was telling the stories that my mind wouldn't, and so all these red flags, where we want to say, oh, our bodies are just weak, or, it's user error, we aren't doing enough. And yeah, just like you said, that shame based, work harder,
Mhm.
perform more, hustle more. If you're
Yeah.
not hustling, you're a weakling, and
Yeah,
that's
I
why
think
your
we're
life is
all
falling apart.
workaholics.
Oh yeah.
I think that workaholism is not limited to a corporate environment. I think moms have been sold it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh yeah.
And so how are you better at speaking your feelings now since all of this happened?
Yeah, I would say yes. I don't love to do them in real time. I like to kind of flush them out privately, and then talk about them or write about
Yeah.
them. But it usually means by the time I'm sharing them that I have dealt with and
Yeah.
digested them myself.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's just one of those things that I think that there's a generation of us, right, that we feelings weren't talked about, and I think
Yeah.
that all of our kids right now that are being raised by women that are reawakening to their voice and their feelings, they're going to have a leg up on this. But so many of us are, we push ourselves and we ignore that these feelings, right, are things that are felt.
Right, right. And it just feels like weakness. Emotion means that I'm not handling it well enough, and that just isn't the case.
This is good. So how is life now? So Avery's had another surgery.
Yeah, yesterday we went and removed kind of the external part of some hardware that they put in her head, and we do have to go back in December and take it out again. So we know there's another surgery there, but other than those surgeries, it has it has really like level. And then of course I had to write a book, and now I'm doing that. So it's there's a little more adventure right now than normal, but it just got so easy and peaceful as we learned better systems, as walking through crisis together. My husband and I had to learn how to support each other in our unique ways. I used to think that going into crisis, everybody would have this shared experience of crisis, this shared experience of grief, and we really don't. And I think that that's kind of a protective mechanism, where I could fall apart and he'd be strong, and then maybe he'd be going through something and I would be feeling stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like we're disconnected sometimes, but it really is, we can never expect somebody to grieve or process the way we do. So over the years, we have come into a really good system for the family. And, everybody is verbal at this point, so we can talk
Hurrah!
to each other, which is a huge thing, that I can communicate with every single one of my children, which is great. So we are homeschooling. I've been doing that for a couple of years. I was homeschooling before Avery was born, and then I stopped and sent my oldest son, who was the only school age child at the time, to private school, and with the promise that when everything calmed down, I would bring him back home. And so 2 years ago, I told him I would bring him home in the fall, and we did. And he is just thrilled. He does so well at homeschooling, and Avery I've homeschooled now. This is her second year, so she's in kindergarten. I did preschool with her last year, and this is my first year of homeschooling my second child, who is full of energy, but she is doing really, really well. And we just have reached such a sweet spot as a family. It's really special, and something that I appreciate so much more
Yeah.
after 2 or 3 years of just nonstop crisis.
One of the lines is that you had to trust the process of childhood for
Mm,
when Ryan was born.
yeah.
Are you still trusting the process of childhood as you're, especially now as you're homeschooling and seeing these kids all day long?
All day long, more and more, really. I really took that process for granted and tried to control it more than I should have when my two older children were younger. And then and thought I had way more of a hand in it than I needed to,
I
and
think
then
every
Avery
mom
came.
feels that way, right?
Yeah, I think so. And Avery was just this experiment in how much I did need to be involved,
Mm-hmm.
and then spent years and years working with, physical therapists and occupational therapists and
Mm-hmm.
speech and feeding, and learned so much about what happens naturally for a child, and that if you actually leave them to develop as they should without intervening and trying to make it more convenient for ourselves
Right.
by putting them in special little bouncer seats and all these things, like when
Yep.
I realized that there was so much to the way children used to be raised that now we've turned into all the gadgets moms need when you first have a baby, all these
Yes.
things, that the industry of childhood now, right?
Very much the
That
industry
is,
and pushing independence so much earlier than
yes,
maybe they're
yeah,
ready.
yes, we're pushing to, if you have a child who's maybe a little slower to speak, wanting to intervene immediately. And there
Yep.
are times where intervening is important, but there are other times where you just need to trust the process of their development. And if everything else is moving at that same speed, like every child kind of has their developmental curve. And as long as we're following the curve, even if it's slower, it's totally fine. Like, don't give a child a complex where
Yeah.
they don't need to have one. And so, our pediatrician, who was Avery's kind of primary care. She doesn't have a big hand in Avery's care, but kind of we just keep up with her every
Yeah.
once in a while. And she knew why I was so panicked about Ryan as a baby, and she would just tell me, he's fine. He really is fine. You just gotta let this boy do what he needs to do. And I just felt like, he was a colicky baby. I just felt like I needed to get in there and
Yeah.
help him out, the way I had to do with Avery. And she was just like, you really just need to put him down on the ground and let him figure it out. And he really did. And he has been my earliest developer in every single way. He is really a genius of a child, and something that I can take no credit for.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with it. I really had to let him do what he needed to do. And there is so much, even with homeschooling, that we we see where something could be an issue, so we want to get in and meddle right away. And
Uh-huh.
it's just like, just let them be for a little while.
Yep.
Let's just follow this train. Let's just follow their lead for a minute and see where this goes. And there's just so much there. I really could write a book just on that, like, trusting those processes of childhood that are, designed by God
Yes.
and really necessary. And we in our zeal to mother them well, sometimes we over mother them, and we steal from them, honestly.
Yeah, I found one of my planners from homeschooling that was like 5 years old because I have a ninth grader, a seventh grader, and a second grader that I homeschool. And so I found some notes from when my seventh grader was, I don't know, 5 years ago. So in second grade, and I was concerned about some pencil grip development or something. And I was like, well, that's worked out. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't have to worry about that. Like, I was so concerned that I remember Googling and feeling like I was going to fail in some way. And I could just have trusted the process a little bit more, played a little bit more with Play-Doh, like put some opportunities in there for natural development, but not worry about it because she's amazing. She can play the violin just fine. So I'm sure she's got manual dexterity to hold her pencil nowadays. I know she does.
Oh, you got it. That's great. That is a great word for somebody I know.
It's so hard in those moments. I think sometimes the hardest thing about homeschooling, I'll jump on and give my little soapbox moment for this one, is that we don't see the other kids our kids' ages, right? Like we see the 12-year-old that we have, we see the 7-year-old that we have, but we don't have the 7-year-old collective to compare them against. So when I was a classroom teacher before I taught, like I had this whole room of third graders. So I could see like, oh, this is just what third graders do. And I know that there's this giant spectrum. But as I homeschool, I've lost that big view of like, oh, this is just a 12-year-old thing. It's going to work itself out. So when you said about trusting the process of childhood, even now with my kids being the ages that they are, I still have to lean in. Like this process of living and growing just happens. And it was such a good line that I highlighted it and I put it on a sticky note in front of me.
That's awesome. That's good.
So thank you for writing this journey and thank you for sharing. I felt like I was grieving living with you as I was reading this, and I know that you're beyond what you wrote and you're still living this life. But I'm glad that you've got this moment on paper.
No, thank you.
So thank you. Every episode, I end with a self-care idea that a mom can do, something small or tiny or something that can breathe life into them, and then a family play idea. Would you like to share some ideas for those today?
Yeah, so I have figured out that self-care for me has changed depending on the season that I'm in, you know? So it to me it's really about like taking a second and figuring out what do I need? What is going to be where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck in self-care? And for me right now that because I'm homeschooling everybody and they're in the house with me all the time, most of the time it's getting up early. I know that's not a sexy thing to say, but like getting up early so that I spend time as an introvert where no one is talking to me, you know, where no one needs anything from me.
Yep.
And I'll do devotions, maybe read a book, you know, set my coffee so that it's already brewing when I get up, you know, at 6 and then just sitting there by myself. So that's something for me right now. In other times, it's been where a few mornings a week I'll have set it up with my husband that he gets up with the baby and I sleep for an extra 30 minutes. You know, those practical things are so important and they're not the same from season to season. So it's not really about like getting the pulse on where you are and then saying, what do I need in this season? What do I need today? What is going to help me, you know, feel most like myself, feel most filled up so that I can give to other people. So that's where I am currently, is just trying to spend a little bit of time every day by myself.
Yeah.
And a family play idea, I'm so glad you asked that because that just does not come naturally to me. Play does not come naturally to me. And so I was thinking like, what ways have we been doing that? And for us, we have made like Friday nights a movie night.
Yeah.
And so we'll have dinner a little early and everybody gets their bath and everybody's ready for bed. And I never would have allowed this before because, you know, like the blue light, you screams before bed is a terrible idea. But on Fridays, it was like, this is something that they love so much that works in all seasons and we can do this. And then the other day we were playing baseball out in the backyard. And so that is something we did as a family. We had the chickens running around, the dog running around trying to eat the baseball, but it was such a good time. And my son said to me, like, when we do this, these are the best days that we have. Like, that is so sweet and something that, you know, when they go outside to play with their dad, it's like, you go outside, I'll make dinner, or I'll come inside the house. I want to be efficient and use this time wisely. And all they wanted me to do was sit out there on the deck and watch them play. Because Lord knows they're not going to want me to play baseball with them. But just to witness so they could say, hey, mom, did you see that? Whatever. So
Staying in
that
the
has been
space. It's
my
so
thing.
hard,
Yeah.
right? I think this
Yeah.
is where, when we talk about moms and workaholism, we miss the moments
Oh,
because we're
yeah.
trying to get work done instead of being in the space and
Yeah.
being witness.
And that's all they wanted was for me to just sit out there and watch them play. And it was really, really special. So,
That's fantastic. I'm glad you did that. Way to go. That's
yeah,
huge.
thanks.
Like, seriously, pat on the back and then remind yourself next time.
Yeah.
The dishes
Be
the
out there with
dishes will
them.
get done. We know they will. You have a
This
track
is
record.
true. Exactly. I don't know why I don't trust that with myself. Like if I let it go a couple times a week to go sit out there and be with them, like is that going to be the snowball that keeps rolling into the house just blows up and becomes a mess? Like that's not the case. I'm not that I'm
You
That's
know
not my
yourself.
track
Yeah.
record. Yeah. So why not take advantage of those times, And that's something that's a work in progress for me.
I'm sure someone else needed to hear that because I think we all have the thing that we think is going to snowball and that we're scared to let it sit for a little bit. So, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Where can people find you online, Meg, so they can keep following you?
Yeah, so most of the time I'm on Instagram. That's kind of where I share our day to day. And so my handle is Meg_Apperson.
Okay.
And I do write for my blog relatively regularly. That is forfinelives.com. And I'm never on Facebook if I can help it. So those are really the two places where
Me
you can
too.
find me.
I have a Facebook account. I haven't deactivated it, but it's just gathering dust.
Yes, Instagram makes me have one because the two are connected, but yeah, I try to avoid. I don't have the app on my phone. Like I have Instagram on my phone. I do not have Facebook on my phone. So I actually have to go to the website to ever engage that way. But those are the places you can find me. Don't try Facebook.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, and good luck. Keep writing.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course, I enjoyed it. Good to talk to you.